You are listening to the 80s Slasher Librarian. Keep listening, or I'll kill you.
There's a lover.
Chapter 6. This is not going to work, Linda stated. I can't believe we have this crappy equipment, and we're supposed to produce results. Free blinked twice, but decided to say nothing and just let her rant. I haven't seen a system this old since Skull. Then you must have graduated last week, Anyar told her as she passed by and entered the biolab. The model on your desk just came out a month ago. Before Linda had a chance to respond, Anyar closed the glass door. Brad, and ever the diplomat regarding Linda, said, Sweetie, we knew we'd be roughing it here. It's likely that this equipment isn't top priority for the big wigs. Free felt he had to jump in, if only to defend Jackson. This project is top priority, but it is an experiment, and I know that Jackson Mansfield got the best equipment he could find for the price he paid, and I also know that the price was considerable. We're here to set a hypothesis. It may not work. We may end up with a Major Tom brain and a chunky body that looks humanoid but can't function, or we might get the opposites. Realistically speaking, we'll be lucky if we can instill even one emotion into this creature. Wow, great pep talk, not, Linda said. I really feel like working now. Nobody thinks we'll succeed. That's not true. We wouldn't be here, being paid, if there was no hope. One thing I know about Jackson Mansfield is that he doesn't waste a second of his time or energy on what he believes will fail. If he didn't think we could succeed in full or in part, we would not be here. And he'd be using Elysium as a giant warehouse for storage or some shit like that. Well, I, for one, don't see how we can replicate human thinking. Thought patterns, sure. We've got the AI already doing that. He does a lot more, but that's not the same as how a person thinks. Our best shot is my initial idea, to transfer data from the university computers, a kind of history from the beginning of time on Earth and Earth 2, and let the new AI we're building sort it all out for themselves. That would take forever and a day, Linda, Sky said. We couldn't load all that into a system here. We need expansion cubes, millions of them, and we'd have to find a way for it to run quickly, which means not only more memory, but a processor that's faster than anything we can now build. They've got a 27 squared processor where we went to school, Brad offered. Yeah, and, Sky said, I've used those. That just means if we loaded in 100 libraries, we could run it at top speed. But you're talking about data from 1 million or more libraries. We could fragment the memory, Linda offered. Each expansion cube could handle what it can handle, and we'd have one for each segment of human history. And it would take us 5 years to make this happen, Free said. Well, what's your solution? Linda demanded. Free felt frustrated. I have no solution. That's what we're here for, to brainstorm and find solutions to this problem. I have a better idea, Sky said. Oh, and what would that be? Linda asked, her voice laced with skepticism. We load in our personal and collective memories to the new AI by direct brain-to-computer hookup, Sky said. Are you serious? Brad snapped. Give over the privacy of our thoughts to a fucking computer for everyone in the entire universe to see. Sky ignored his comments, which impressed Free considerably. Look, she said, if we did it anonymously, nothing would be attributed to any of us. There are 6 of us here, and we'd be mixing experiences, emotional, physical, and mental reactions, and our ability to analyze situations. What we'd end up with would be an amalgam of the 6 of us, Sky said. The totality would be greater than the sum of the parts, Free said. Won't the AI be confused? Herbert said, sticking his head out the door to also say, Anyar and I have come up with a simulation, if you'd like to take a look. In a minute, Free said. We need to sort this out first. Even if we decide to go with your plan, and I'm not sure it would work, Linda said reluctantly, clearly trying to keep her tongue civil. How are we going to do a direct transfer? That's experimental. As far as I know, nobody has managed it and come up with anything different than a standard input of data. Well, one person did, replied Sky. And who might that be? Dr. Castillo. The guy who worked on the moon complex for the military, right? Well, great. Do we have his records? Brad asked. Yes, Sky said. What? Free's head snapped around. Where are these records? Sky looked away. I saw them, or what was available, a long time ago, before the effort to extinguish them. What do you mean, extinguished? Free wanted to know. I searched and I couldn't find anything, not even a record that there were records. That's because they were secret. Then how did you see them? I read them as a child. No one said anything for a few moments, not fully understanding the implications of what Sky had just said. Why don't you guys come see the sim? Anyar eventually said. She stood in the doorway next to Herbert. The others, for lack of anything better to do, stood up one by one and followed Anyar and Herbert into the biotech room. Hold on a second, Anyar said. She pressed a button on the wall, which locked the door and also set in motion the air vacuum system that sucked out all of the dust and other small particles from the room. Herbert manipulated the computer, and a holographic image appeared in the air, standing on the platform. Wow, he's utterly huge, Brad said. What makes you think it's a he? Anyar wanted to know. Well, the lack of what's obvious, Brad said. What? Breast? There's a lack of what's obvious for the male gender, too, Anyar added. How come he's so large? Free asked. I mean, why do we need a giant? We can use nanotechnology. We're trying to build something that can contain all the programs we want to input, right? Anyar explained. This is a prototype, remember? Herbert and I think we need to make the form huge and full to the max with everything we can stuff in there. Once we see what works and what doesn't, then we can refine this model, including reducing the size and shape of the form, as well as reducing the data to nano-programming. The six stared in awed silence as the hologram began to rotate slowly. The arms and shoulders of the simulated body were massive. The musculature of the back, chest, and thighs gargantuan, even compared to bodybuilder proportions. The head seemed a trifle square-shaped, which Brad pointed out. Herbert started to say. Needed to make sure the cubes have some place to go where it's easy to insert them and take them out as needed. I don't like it, Linda remarked. Her arms were crossed over her chest, her face set and her eyes rounded with a look that Free could only interpret as barely repressed terror. Why don't you like it? He asked her gently. She turned to face him, about to say something, when Sky said, I think the image makes sense. Herbert is right. We need a form that's large enough to work with. Refinement comes later. Linda turned on her like a rabid animal. No, this isn't going to work. I will not work with a monster. Sky raised an eyebrow. A monster? You mean like the one you saw at the military complex? A slight smile played on her lips, and Free knew that she had entered dangerous territory. He was not wrong. Yes, it's exactly like what I saw. Same shape, same size, everything. Maybe there's a reason this design is used. She turned to Anyar and Herbert, who seemed to both lean in onto each other as if for protection. That sim, did you make it yourselves? It was in the computer, Anyar said. We played with the basic model. There, Linda said, yelling at everyone in the room, and to Free she appeared deranged. It was already there because it has been used before. To make the goddamn thing I saw at the military complex. That's not possible, Free said. These computers just arrived a few weeks before we did. All of them? Linda cried out. Major Tom, Free nearly shouted. Here, said the modulated voice. When did the biolab's equipment arrive on Elysium? 32 days, 6 hours, 47 minutes, and 8 seconds ago. By Earth 2 time. Now, 10 seconds. Did it come with basic programs? Free continued. As far as I know, yes, MT replied civilly. Were any programs added? Not to my knowledge. There, Free said, turning to Linda. He wanted to place a soothing hand on her shoulder, but was afraid of how she'd react. He had so little experience dealing with people, with women, with emotions in general. Sweets! I think this equipment couldn't have been used here before, Brad said, his voice soft and comforting and reassuring. Linda turned to him, and Free watched her face soften a bit, while her shoulders lowered, which is when he realized just how tense she had been. Do you think that could be true? That the AI is telling the truth? She asked Brad. I believe so, Brad said. There's no reason for it to lie. And I have the communication from Jackson that I received on Earth 2 before we left, with details about supplies and equipment. So I know the date it was shipped here, Free said. Then why does the image look so much like what I saw? Linda asked, staring at the hologram as it spun mindlessly on the wheel of the platform, as if it would any second come to life and attack her. I think it's a pretty standard model, Anyar said. We used one just like this at school. Suddenly, Linda tensed up again. I bet the AI did this. Huh? Herbert said. You mean Major Tom? Free asked, incredulous. Yes, that AI. It's been here all along, being all snarky and smart-aleck. It's programmed a form into the computer that matches the one I saw at the military complex. Sweetie, that's a bit far-fetched, Brad started, but Linda now turned on him, too. Don't be a fool. Something went wrong here. That's why there's nobody on this moon complex but prisoners. An experiment went wrong. An AI is left that says it's a replica of the original AI, but with the malfunctioning chips cleaned out. I say this AI hasn't been cleaned up enough. I think still has some of Dr. Castillo's experiments still embedded in it, and it reprogrammed our system. Hold on, Free said. That sounds crazy. You have no proof of that. I may not have proof, but I'm not crazy. I'm cautious. Everything here is set up to work on a project that might have been the same project that Castillo experimented with. Sky saw the notes. He was recreating life, wasn't he? Sky looked down. In a manner of speaking, yes. He was trying to infuse an artificial form with something resembling human life. His technique used a bit mapping process to create the virtual images first. Linda looked as if her worst fears had been confirmed. His experiment failed, so much so that almost all trace of it was wiped out, and this place abandoned. And there you have an image of something I saw at the complex, and I know it's the thing Castillo created. Maybe what you saw at the complex was a virtual image, Anyar said. It didn't look virtual to me. Wait, Free said. MT, did you program any of the equipment that was sent to this moon by Jackson Mansfield? Certainly not. It is not part of my mandate to program any new additions to Moon Complex. And before you ask, I only reprogram systems as required. For instance, to maintain a safe atmosphere, breathable by humanoids, to reconstitute enough moisture to sustain the non-virtual part of the biodome, to cleanse the... Okay, I get it, Free said. So the AI didn't program our biolab or any of our other computers and equipment. And Anyar says that the program image is standard. Even if what you saw or thought you saw, I saw it! What you saw is something from the experiment. That doesn't mean it has anything to do with us. This AI is not the original AI. It has no program that allows it to function unilaterally. I think what we have is a coincidence. This hologram, a standard hologram, looks the same as the standard hologram that Dr. Castillo must have used. What? 20 years ago? Linda asked incredulously. I don't see they've changed much in centuries, Anyar said. This is the human form. All right, Linda said. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that what you're saying is so. It's the same hologram or similar. The new Major Tom can't program it. The thing I saw at the military complex is some remnant of the experiment. Which is, by the way, trapped inside the building across the lake, Brad pointed out. And we are outside. But here we are, about to create life, just as Castillo did, based on his ideas. Linda looked at Sky with a mixture of scorn and eyes that pleaded for understanding. And by the way, where did you see these notes on his experiments? Everyone turned to stare at Sky. She said carefully, Castillo knew my family. He left some of his research notes with my mother, and she kept them for several years after his death. I've always been interested in science, and I read them when I was 8 years old, barely understanding them. But over time, they started to make sense. They probably were the basis for my cybernetic studies. Where are these notes now? Free asked. They're no longer available. Meaning? Meaning I don't have them on me, if that's what you're implying. So, Linda started saying again, you read notes that tell how to directly infuse the totality of human experience into an AI, presumably by direct transfer. Obviously, the experiment failed. Why should we pursue it again? I think, Sky said, because he had a master plan that might have had some bugs, but also might have been sound in many ways. Castillo was a renowned scientist and innovator, so we have to assume that his experiment was not only funded by the military because they thought it would work, but also because he was a genius and had grants coming out of his ears. How do you know that? Free asked. I don't know for sure, but from what I read about him, little as it was, and from what my mother said about him, also very little, I got the feeling he was the Einstein of his day. Then how come there's no information available about him? Anyar asked. If he was such a genius, then there should be records of his work. I don't know. I only know that from what I read, he had some success. And since we have no other way of infusing our being with humanoid life, I think this is worth a shot. I'm inclined to go along with this, Anyar said. Me too, Herbert agreed. Brad, what do you think? Free asked. He could see that Brad was intentionally avoiding looking at Linda. It makes sense to me. From the shocked look on Linda's face, Free as well as Brad could see that this was not the answer she expected. I disagree, she said. Strongly. I think we should use the library databases. Give the creature some history, and not just the brain cells of 6 post-pubescent Earth-2 babies working at their first job. I think we can also include some of the library cubes, Free said, trying to mollify her. But he realized that she had a point about history. He knew his own limitations regarding his missing history, as well as that of his species, which he would have learned in a more expansive fashion if he'd been educated anywhere but privately on a satellite at the edge of the galaxy. The cyborg should have a better chance. I'm with the majority. You with us, Linda? She looked angry and after a pause said, Well, I guess I have to be, don't I? I don't think you have to put your experiences in if you don't want to. No one does, actually. Now that's a relief, she snarled. But you know, who I am should be in the cyborg. Someone needs to infuse it with caution and skepticism, and apparently none of you are up to it. Good point, Free said, hoping that agreeing with her would ease down her paranoia. Linda took that as agreement and nodded imperceptibly. So, Brad asked, how and when do we go about giving ourselves to the cyborg? We already have, Sky said. Wait here. She left them and returned to her console, keying some info into her computer and returning within a minute. You can start inputting from computer station 1, she said. Herbert turned to the control panel along the wall and pressed a button and flipped 2 switches. One of the colored wires inside the transparent cable lit up. I've done a quickie download, Sky said. The input took less than 3 seconds. Activate the input. We should see a result. At least I hope so, Sky said, the last under her breath. Onyar gave a verbal signal which rebooted the system. Lights flashed for 3 seconds. When the holographic image began to spin again, it appeared slightly different. "Wow, it looks a bit like you," Brad said to Sky. "Not much, but then there wasn't time for much transfer." "What's your name?" she asked the hologram. "Sky Fellows." "How old are you?" "I'll be 25 in 1 month." "Where are you located at the moment?" "I'm working with a group of 6 cyber specialists on Elysium, a moon of Earth 2. We're trying to build an artificial intelligence that replicates and imitates a human being in all aspects." "How are you doing on this project?" "We're at the initial stages, but things look promising." "I have a question," Linda said. "What do you think of your coworkers?" "I respect the credentials of everyone I'm working with." "And their personalities?" "Some are easier to get along with than others." "How diplomatic. Who is not easy to get along with?" "You." Suddenly, Linda laughed and the others joined in. One more question," Free said, and Sky looked at him, her eyes fearful that he might ask something embarrassing. "That space sling, the UUSA, what do you think of it?" The hologram paused in its spinning for a moment. The mouth turned up in a simulation of a smile as it said, "Mind-blowing." Chapter 7. Sky spent the next 2 hours downloading the thoughts and feelings of every member of the team except Free. At least an initial short download from each of them, which would give the group enough to work with. She used one of the new micro-laser scanners through a probe, inserting it up the supraorbital above the eye, a painless procedure that took all of 1 second. The probe captured DNA from each of them, taking it from the cerebral cortex. Those strands were automatically refined by the probe and synthesized, then fed into the computer. Now she had not just their strands of life, but also scanned their neurons, and recorded the patterns of their brain waves. She could do a full-blown download from all 6 of them later, once they made sure this worked. As the meeting had wound down with the shift of mood in the up direction, Free told Sky to work with the others. He would volunteer his DNA and everything else later. So much had happened in such a short space of time that he needed to be alone to think about what had occurred, the implications of it all, and what he should do. He decided to take a walk around the lake to think. As the artificial sun beat down on him and the virtual birds chirped, and as the unnatural squirrels ran up trees and ate their nuts, suddenly an idea struck Free, one that might provide some cohesiveness to his disparate group. It was so obvious he had missed it all along. When he returned to the lab, he said in the most relaxed way he knew how, "Let's all head to the gazebo by the water and share some food and drink." Even Linda and Brad thought it was a good idea, and the group made a stop at the store. Onyar grabbed a couple of bags of cereal, and the rest selected some of their favorite foods. Free lagged behind, picking up 3 bottles of wine, a small case of wine goblets, and some fruit juice for those who didn't indulge in the fermented grape. He was the last to arrive at the lake, and by the time he did, Brad and Herbert were busy setting up the table for the group, under the directions of Linda, who shouted orders at them. "The forks go on the left, the knives on the right," she said in exasperation to Herbert, who in his nervousness managed to drop the knives, making Linda groan. "No," she snapped at Brad. "Chopsticks over the plate." Finally, they sat down to eat, everyone, having a taste of everyone else's food. All the choices were a hit but Anyar's, but they all were gracious about her cereal nonetheless. The warmth of the air, the laughter drifting around them, the clinking glasses and the clatter of utensils on real plates for once as they relaxed and ate and talked and joked. All of it infused Free with a connection he had never experienced before. Suddenly, in the midst of the meal, a feeling overwhelmed him, and his fork paused in midair. Until this moment, he had not realized exactly what he had been missing for most of his life. He had been sheltered, loved, and protected by his mom and by Jackson. He had been offered every advantage in terms of education and lifestyle, or as much as he was possible living on a satellite. But he lacked the company of people, This type of normal interaction was like an exotic pleasure to him, chatting about nothing, teasing one another, laughing, not talking sometimes, just being together. Anything wrong? Sky asked quietly, seated next to him at the hexagonal table. He turned to stare into her beautiful water blue eyes and felt completely at peace. Nothing at all, he said with a smile. Nothing is wrong. Everything is so right. Those serious, soulful eyes flicked over his face for a moment like a caress, and then she smiled too, and it was as if the artificial sun had become a real sun, and his world had brightened. In the next moment, the ground beneath their feet trembled violently. Anyar, who had stood to pour herself another drink, fell onto her side. Herbert toppled off his seat onto his back. Linda teetered on the edge of her part of the bench, but grabbed onto Brad, who held onto the seat to steady them both. By instinct, Free's arm went protectively around Sky, and his hand grabbed the table edge. The fingers of his other hand hooked into the lattice of the gazebo. Glasses, plates, cutlery, all of it shook and spilled off the table, and much of it broke. Food and drink slopped onto the table's surface and ran over the edges in a confused soup, hitting the ground in great plops. The quaking seemed to go on forever, but it couldn't have lasted more than 15 seconds. "What the hell was that?" Brad yelled when it stopped. By now, they were all on their feet. "Everybody okay?" Free asked, looking around. Nods and yeses. "It's like something slammed into the surface of the moon," Linda said. "Major Tom, what happened?" "The UUSA has malfunctioned, Free." "What? The sling? How?" "I am assessing the situation, and we'll have a report as soon as possible." Free was already looking up, trying to see through the dome. All of them were. "Dim the lighting," he ordered. Major Tom instantly complied. As darkness fell over the interior of the moon complex, the blackness beyond lit up with stars. Earth, too, became visible in the distance, as well as its small, dark moon, Thanos. "There!" Brad pointed. It looked as if it had stopped in midair, somewhere between where they stood and the direction they knew the military complex to be. "It's an upside-down antique cherry picker," Herbert said, and although no one was watching him, he looked around and muttered, I grew up on a farm." The enormous object had an enclosed and transparent basket at the bottom, and from it extended a long arm that seemed to stop dead somewhere out in space. "That's the amazing part," Sky mumbled, "that it doesn't connect to anything. It's just pinioned by gravity from the strongest source." "Damage report yet?" Free asked the AI. "I am still analyzing the data, but it appears that the UUSA hit the dome." "How the hell could that happen?" Anyar asked. "Aren't the coordinates set?" "Perhaps the gravitational pull of Earth 2 shifted slightly," Free said. "Maybe something happened there." "Like what?" Herbert asked, his voice fearful. "A tsunami," Major Tom reported. "Magnitude 11.7. From all that I can gather, it appears that the tsunami, while causing no human casualties on Earth 2, did manage to distort the gravitational pull of the planet, altering the anchor of the UUSA, which in turn altered its trajectory by only millimeters. But if you multiply that by the distance from Earth 2's outer layer to the position of the sling in space, it makes quite a big difference," Sky said. "It threw the sling off course badly enough that it bashed into the dome." "Okay, Major Tom, but are we okay in here?" Free asked, what was on everyone's mind. "The dome has been pierced at the outer layer. That does not affect the life support system within," MT said. "I will undertake repairs on the dome, but first the UUSA must move toward its destination." "The military complex?" Linda said, her voice dismal. "Yes, the distance is approximately 200 meters. I must now shatter the dome's exterior layer completely between the UUSA and the complex docking point in order for the UUSA to move along. As it proceeds to its designated docking spot, I can repair the dome behind it. You can do that? Anyar asked, her voice a wed. Can and will. Sounds like a plan, Brad said. A good plan, Free added. Make it happen. The procedure is already underway, MT advised them. I am programmed to support life at all costs. That's good to know, Anyar said. They all stared up, watching through the night sky, as the outer edge of the dome cracked open before their eyes, creating a sort of pathway that led to about where the military complex stood. As the splintering occurred in the dome's outer surface, the UUSA, no longer jammed in the dome, was free to slide along, and it did. Free could see that behind the sling, MT was already repairing the initial collision site. Way to go, MT, he said, turning toward Sky. But she was no longer beside him. He spun all the way around. She was no longer with the group. He wanted to go find her, but also felt he had to stay here and make sure the repairs proceeded and that the catastrophe did not escalate. He also should keep morale up, reassure everyone. Linda and Brad were already turning negative. It's a sign, Linda said knowingly. I think you're right, Lovey, Brad told her. Things like this just don't happen for no reason. We've already had several signs, and this is another one. We ignore them at our peril. This place is evil. I can feel it in my bones. Hold on, Free snapped. The tsunami on Earth, too, is responsible for the sling going off course. Shit happens, as they used to say on the original Earth. Yes, but so much shit in such a short space of time? Linda asked, hands on hips, looking not just adamant, but also somewhat possessed. Nothing else has happened. Just this, and you're making a huge issue out of an accident. Major Tom is already repairing the collision site. Hell! He pointed up. The sling is probably over the military complex at this moment, because we can't see it any longer. It is, Major Tom acknowledged. And look, Free continued, MT has repaired not just the impact site, but has already started on the path the UUSA took, where he cracked the dome so it could continue. I have indeed, MT said. Linda gathered her skirts in her hands. You can say whatever you like, but I know this is a poisonous atmosphere. This place reeks of bad energy. We should leave as quickly as we can, before something terrible happens. And whether or not any of you leave, I will. Call for a shuttle to pick me up, she demanded of Free. Free just stared at her, his mouth gaping. Finally, he said, You want to quit the project before we even start. Not want to, am quitting. This is not a project that I'm interested in anymore. And besides, I don't feel safe here. Sweetums, this has been very upsetting, Brad began. Don't try to talk me out of it. Her voice rose with hysteria. I'm not doing that. I'm just suggesting that we should go back to our cabin and try to relax. This was a shocking incident. All of us are shocked. As he spoke, Brad moved his arm around her waist and was turning her toward the cabins. Come, he said. Let's go back. The six-dimensional puzzle of the medieval village awaits us. We both just need to calm down. Linda looked terrified, and at the same time looked like she could conceivably kill anyone in her path. But amazingly enough, she allowed Brad to lead her away, all the while saying, But I want him to contact Earth too. I want to get the fuck out of here. Now. Once they were out of earshot, Free sat on the bench and held his head up with his hands. His gaze was focused downward, and the ground was littered with the food that had been tossed everywhere. The wine pulling. The water from the lake splashed up onto the shore and soaked some of the shirts and shoes that had been discarded in an effort to relax. He glanced around at the mess, stunned, then up at the sky. It didn't seem to matter that Major Tom had pretty well repaired everything. Somehow this project was falling apart, and it had barely begun. He didn't know if they could do much without Linda's expertise. She might seem ditzy, but she was crucial to the development of the emotional reactions in the cyborg they were building. Anyar came and sat down next to him. She patted his arm. Don't worry. Mistress of the Universe will likely calm down. And you could cheer up. It could have been worse. The good news is the damn sling didn't crash through every layer of the dome. And it didn't suck us all out into space and vaporize us. Oh, that's the good news? Free said, turning his head to look at her. I think I'll just clear some of this up, Herbert said. He carefully picked up the cutlery and broken pieces of dishes off the ground and tossed them and everything else he could scoop up with his hands into the large ice bucket that had held the 3 bottles of wine that Free had brought along. I'll help you, Anyar said, standing, gathering things herself. Hang in there, boss man, she said to Free. Free couldn't move. He sat long after they'd left, still holding his head, wondering what to do. If Linda was serious about quitting, the project was doomed. Maybe he could find a replacement, but who? Few people went into emotional responses these days, and to his knowledge, none possessed her qualifications. Pain in the ass that she was, they had been lucky to get her. And if she quit, would Brad go too? A small groan slipped from between his lips. I believe Miss Singh is correct. You should not worry, MT said. Yeah, but I am worried, Major Tom. We have to give this a shot. I want to. It's everything I want to be doing, working on this project. How could I screw it up so quickly? I don't see that you are responsible, MT said. Thanks, but I think if somebody with more experience with managing people had been in charge, we wouldn't be on the edge of chaos. Major Tom wisely said nothing. How are the repairs going? Free asked dismally. Completed. The dome is repaired. The UUSA is positioned at the military complex loading dock. It will begin loading prisoners in less than 1 hour. What about its trajectory? I believe, from the data I have, that its course is being altered from Earth 2. Its continuous motion has been breached, but its course will be corrected, and it will be set in motion again from the command center on Earth 2 when all of the prisoners are loaded and ready for transport. It will resume operations in approximately 18 hours, give or take. Earth 2 time, of course. The revised codes will likely allow the sling to move faster in order to compensate for the diminished trajectory. Good to know, Free said. He sighed heavily and stood. He should go see about something. Maybe Sky. Try to find out why she fled. Hopefully the sling's crash didn't upset her so much that she too wanted to abandon ship. He started his search at the lab, but it was empty. As he walked toward her cabin, he hoped she was okay. He needed her, and not just for the project. He didn't understand the feeling of connection he had, but he did know enough that he realized he should respect it. Her door was ajar when he knocked. No answer. So he pushed it open a bit and called. Hello, Sky, are you there? Sky? Still no answer. So he asked Major Tom, do you know where Sky is? Whereabouts unknown, MT said, which means she has directed me not to say. Great, Free said, about to close the door when a flash of movement caught his eye. He peered inside, and what he saw caused him to step into the cabin. Sky had set her cabin as both a bedroom and an office. She had brought an extra terminal from the lab, and it sat on a makeshift desk along with a few pieces of equipment he vaguely recognized as transfer devices. She must have brought these with her from Earth 2, but he didn't have a clue why. The equipment Jackson had sent them was more modern and more powerful than this antiquated stuff. The movement was a holographic image, similar to the one Anyar and Herbert had created in the lab. This image was not life-size, but 1/10 the size, what was commonly called a working dimension. It rotated in the air at a speed slightly faster than the one in the lab. Still, whenever it came face to face with Free, he found himself chilled. The body was the same, but instead of being made entirely of flesh, or a facsimile of flesh, this form seemed to be partly metallic. But that was not what was unnerving Free. The face was a mask of cold silver metal that had been slipped over and fitted to the features, as if to hide them, creating an angular face, violent looking. The only human features that came through loud and clear were the eyes. Eyes that spoke of blood and torture and murder, red with hate. And it absolutely resembled what Linda claimed to have seen at the military complex. Okay, this has been chapters 6 and 7 of Jason X to the Third Power. And I know that some may be disappointed that Jason's not out killing yet, but I've got to say, a lot of these books, when there's not much action going on, it feels like just filler, and it's not quite enjoyable. But I'm actually enjoying reading this book. I'm enjoying the characters. I'm enjoying the AI, Major Tom. And I'm curious to see what happens with the characters, not just with Jason killing. Though I feel like we're ever so close to him making his full debut in the book. I think within an upload or two, the bodies are going to start to hit the floor. That's my feeling anyways. You guys let me know in the comments section what you think of the book so far. I'd love to hear from you guys. Also, I want to take the time to direct you all towards an awesome YouTube channel. It's another narration channel that does really good work, really creepy stuff, top notch. I want you to check it out. The name of the channel is Horrors by Lily C. Nation. I'm going to put a link to the channel in the description below, as well as a thumbnail above at the end screen to the channel, and one of the videos that they've uploaded recently that I think is exceptionally creepy. Please check out the channel, check out the videos, subscribe, click the like button on those videos. They do a really good job over there. Let them know that the 80s Slasher Librarian sent you. And until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s Slasher Librarian saying, thanks for listening, and have a great night. And check out that channel. I think you'll like it. See you.